Hello folks, in this guide we are taking a look into how you would go about crafting your own builds. This guide is extremely beginner friendly and I've taken the time to explain a lot of the core mechanics along the way. I don't intend to influence you at all, instead I simply hope to inspire and give you some sense of direction, as I believe there is a lot of fun to be had within Khazan's build system and it may be a little bit overwhelming for some new players to get into. Rest assured, we'll take our time but we won't be wasting a second of it, so let's get started. First things first, what does a build consist of? Typically, what comes first is choice of weapon. Next would come stat allocation, which more or less follows some strict rules, depending on weapon type and character level. Next would be our actual chosen weapon, armor, and accessories, as well as whichever skills we've chosen within the skill trees. The most freedom we have with customizing a build is the weapon, armor, and accessory choices, but those decisions typically come after choosing a weapon, so we'll start from there. Weapon choice will mostly come down to preference, but in a nutshell, dual wielding is an intensive playstyle, capable of racking up elemental damage very quickly, focusing both on dodging and blocking whilst having some of the longest combos in game, more single target based with relatively short range without the use of skills, typically the toughest weapon to use in the game. The greatsword offers big stagger potential, knocking enemies out of attacks and into big damage windows, focusing more on a blocking playstyle and quite capable of holding its ground and going toe to toe, offering what is probably the most forgiving experience within Khazan. Finally, for the spear, we have a higher focus on weaving through fights, capable of dealing with groups and single targets quite well, with a slightly higher focus on dodging over guarding, and still quite capable of racking up elemental effects due to some of its rapid attacks. The spear offers the most technical and middle ground experience within Khazan. Of course, there's a lot of generalization there, and if you'd like something explaining the weapons either a little or a lot deeper, then feel free to check out the channel. Regardless, once you've made your choice, you will then want to allocate stats correctly. Decisions may vary with time, but ultimately you'll be rotating between 3 stats, regardless of choice. Vitality and endurance are both core stats. Vitality affects max health and endurance affects max stamina. There is more to it than this, but ultimately these will both need leveling through your progress within Khazan. Next, depending on what weapon you've chosen, strength is best for greatswords, willpower is best for dual wielding, and proficiency is best for spears. Each weapon has a substat which will also increase damage, but not as much as its core stat, and there doesn't seem to be any diminishing returns, meaning for the best damage, you would only want to level your weapon's core stat. Once progressing much further through the game and either capping out your core stat or coming close to, you may want to consider one of the other 2 stats for the additional effects they give. However, this would be much later on, and you should have a much better understanding of a lot more mechanics by then. Our final note for the stats allocation would be your agility level. As far as I know, this can be either A, B, or C, A being the best and C being the worst. I don't know all of the ins and outs, but I can say that A, agility will grant 30% stamina recovery and a 10% decrease to the stamina cost of dodging, making A, agility a pretty important stat. For the most part, it seems to be only armor that affects weight, and this will contrast against your own agility level. To acquire agility level A, you will need 60% weight or less, so consider this when building. Next, we have the skill tree. This is more complicated than I'd like to get into during this guide. However, a solid way of figuring this out is simply to play the game and use skills throughout. In different situations, you'll realize different things about the skills, such as dodge attacks are solid at dealing with small mobs like dogs, spiders, or monkeys. Sprinting charge attacks can mop up smaller humanoid enemies very, very quickly. There's more to it than this, but ultimately, it will take experience with the different skills. Once you know what you like and what you tend to use most within your skill trees, such as you tend to dodge more than you guard, or you prefer to build up lots of spirit for skills, as opposed to chaining combos that don't require much spirit at all. Once you have this figured out to some degree, it will help with choosing your actual weapon, armor, and accessory. Moving on to choice of weapon, armor, and accessories, this really is the fun part of building. Before we get into the good stuff, it's worth noting that you will not be able to craft, augment, or modify gear before having first unlocked their respective NPCs and or upgrades. First, you'll find the blacksmith at the end of the Strange Stench mission within Scopher Cave. After speaking with him at the crevice, you'll then be able to locate his hammer on the blacksmith's heirloom mission located within the spider's tomb. To unlock armor sets, you'll first need to find the armor's recipe. I have a guide on my channel covering all of the recipes within Charnock Mountain Range, and I will be covering all of the regions, so do feel free to check it out. Additionally, once progressing to the Power Lost Plateau region, you'll discover this location named Silent Temple, and upon completing this, you will then be able to augment and modify your equipment with Oksana. Now, typically, our choice of weapon, armor, and accessories will come down to everything we've previously looked at. Taking a look at the armor sets here, we can see that the set bonuses offer us lots of extra potential. To break this down entirely, we're going to use a few different examples. To start with, we're going to say we've chosen dual wield as our preferred weapon. We want to now find an armor set that complements this weapon and our playstyle. We can look at sets like the Fallen Guardian, which comes specifically with a dual wield weapon type, taking the set bonus requirements to 6 and not just 5. This tells us that this armor set is geared towards a dual wield playstyle due to it being that weapon that is attached to the set. If we look a little further, we can see that none of the set bonuses are weapon specific. However, the build-up of elemental effects is very good for dual wield, given their rapid attack patterns. Alternatively, we could take a look at the armor set like the Butcher, which also specifically comes with the dual wield weapon. Taking a look at the set bonuses, we can see there's no focus on elemental effects, but instead a focus on increasing the damage of specified skills, making the choice between the two completely dependent on your own desire for either a fire elemental build or a build that complements skills you may already be using a lot. Alternatively, there are some more basic options available, such as the armor sets that do not have a primary weapon attached. These sets typically only go up to 5 on the set bonuses and offer alternative options. The earlier game features armor sets more specific to enemy types and or survivability. However, the mid or late game armor sets really starts opening up the options a lot more. Adding to all of this, some of these sets do not consist of armor and instead feature a weapon and accessories. Taking the Pilgrim set for example, another set geared specifically towards dual wielding. This set focuses on the use of potent blows and can make a nice addition to any of the 5 set bonuses or even one of the 6 set bonus sets, just minus the final set bonus. There's plenty of options depending on preferred playstyle. Progressing through the game will really open these up and should give you some idea along the way as to your preferred playstyle and or builds you would like to make. As an additional note here, it's worth mentioning that the main difference between blue or purple gear is the addition of one extra attribute on the purple gear, making it much more worthwhile to aim for a set of purple gear as opposed to blue. To move on to the final few sections of this guide, we have augmenting and modifying gear stats. Now, put simply, to augment gear is to simply increase its level and thus its relevance. I'm uncertain as to how effective this is at keeping your gear relevant throughout an entire playthrough. However, it can keep an armor set relevant for much longer than it otherwise would have been, so a useful tool nonetheless. To explain it a little bit further, you would take a gear of higher level and infuse it into gear you wish to keep, i.e. an armor set you've specifically crafted but is now falling behind in levels. Doing so will take the high level gear and destroy it, but it will slightly increase the level and properties of the gear you've infused it on. Like I say, this needs further testing, but it's a good way of keeping your old gear a little bit more relevant for longer. The more important mechanic here is modifying, aka re-rolling. Re-rolling is simply changing the random attributes that gear has been given upon being dropped or crafted. There is an element of random chance here, but for the most part, it shouldn't be too difficult crafting something you're happy with. Now, I know we've only been brief, but we will be returning and covering this section again very, very shortly. For the final part of this guide, let's take everything we've discussed and put it into actual practice. So beginning with our example build, I want to use dual wield for this character, so that's already established. Stat allocation follows the standard path of prioritizing vitality and endurance slightly more than damage, just until they're at a comfortable position, such as 30 or so, and then I'll work on willpower for additional damage. For the skill trees, we currently have limited options, but chosen skills here currently consist of mainly Brink Guarding, Closing Gaps with Breeze Dash, Ruthless for big damage windows, and finally Gale for the extra damage buff. It's a solid baseline and we do have some skill points that we will come back to shortly, but using what we have so far, let's go ahead and choose our armor set. For the purposes of this character, we are interested in the Fallen Guardian set. We like the idea of racking up elemental damage, and the inherent extra damage built into this set does look appealing. Before crafting anything, we're going to take a look in our inventory for any pieces we may already have. Fortunately, we have 1 Fallen Guardian chest piece, and coincidentally 5 Guardian hooves, so we are able to craft the whole set. We have considered maybe losing the set 6 bonus and replacing the weapon with the Pilgrim set, along with accessories for the Pilgrim's buff, but after weighing up our options, we'd rather take the set 6 bonus from the Fallen Guardian set, given it's a 15-second long damage buff of potentially 20% more damage. With these decisions made, we're going to craft the pieces we don't already own. With our entire set made, let's head on over to Oksana to finally tweak our gear. Now, we know this armor set is very focused on damage, so we're going to take a look into giving ourselves some extra utility and or survivability. Looking at our weapon first, we're actually quite happy with these offensive stats, so we are going to keep them as is. Moving on to our helmet, we have max stamina and an unscathed buff to stamina damage. We're happy with the max stamina, but the stamina damage buff is locked behind unscathed. Unscathed is the term given to being at full health, meaning we only deal the additional 3.4% stagger damage when at full health. Because of this, we're going to reroll for something a little bit less conditional. Our first reroll gives us increased critical damage. We're rerolling for something less conditional again. Our next roll is max health, and we're happy to take it given our armor's focus on offense already. Moving on to the chest piece, we have received stamina damage decrease and critical damage received decrease. We're happy with the reduced stamina damage for now, but we're going to re-roll the critical as we prioritize counter-attacking these anyway. We've rolled a received damage decrease and we're keeping this for now, at least until we can see how our other rolls go. Up next, we have our wrist guards. We have max stamina and guard stamina decrease. We're happy with the max stamina as it stacks with our previous attributes, and stacking a few of these can go a long way. As for the guard stamina decrease, we're going to re-roll it as we rely on brick guarding a lot anyway, making this buff not very useful. What plays out next is a long series of re-rolls due to the majority of the rolls resulting in conditional and or offensive buffs. We finally land on a 6.3 stamina recovery rate if unscathed, and we decide to keep it for now, mainly due to this item's re-rolls starting to become quite costly. For our pants, we have defense and max health. We're actually happy to keep both of these as the max health does stack and the defense doesn't hurt. Finally, moving on to the shoes, we have two conditional buffs, so we're going to re-roll them both. We're happy with stamina recovery, but not dodge cost as we don't dodge often, so we're going to re-roll this until we're happy. We finally land on max stamina, and of course we are happy to keep this. Moving on to the entire set now, our total buffs acquired are 90 additional stamina, 154 max health, 183 defense, and 10.5 stamina recovery, and that is including the 6.3 unscathed condition. There are of course some additional attributes in here. I'd preferably re-roll for increased health or stamina, just to bolster the build that little bit more, as I think its inherent damage will be good enough. But for the purposes of this guide, I think this shows enough about creating your own build and exactly how you would go about doing so. That's it for this guide, folks. I do have a range of guides on the channel and I am working hard on many more, so do feel free to stop on by and check things out. I should have some big news regarding Steam key giveaways for Khazan within the next day or so. They will be announced via posts and in all future Khazan videos, so do stay tuned for that. But otherwise, thanks for watching, folks, and until next time, peace.